You're tuned in to the Stingbat Radio Network on FM 101.2 KRPG. Welcome to Dungeon Master Diaries, a podcast about Shadowdark and other role-playing games, where two GMs talk about their recent experiences at the table and hopefully give you something useful that you can take to yours. On the show today, we discuss the cry of the Stingbat. Hello there, sages and adventurers. My name is Matt, and with me as always is my good friend and colleague, Jody.
What's going down? I am nervous about this episode. I'm just going to put it out there.
Oh, don't be. It's going to be great.
Yep.
For everyone except for those level 0 heroes.
Yeah, not so much.
Because today's episode focuses on the Cry of the Stingbat Gauntlet, which we played through at the time of recording just a few days ago. Just a few days ago. I can barely contain my excitement. Jody, take us to the table.
Welcome, traveler. Your journey begins aboard the merchant ship, the Melano Gale. You set sail a few days ago with your destination set for the Upwell Festival at a small coastal town nearby. The captain of the ship just informed you that before you turn in for the night, expect to see shore in the morning. Your destination's near. A horrible shrieking in the distance, and above decks the sound of battle awaken you from your slumber. Some of your fellow passengers head up to investigate while others of you remain huddled below decks. The shrieking continues and intensifies. Stingbats! And from the sound of things, an impossibly large swarm. Blood begins to drip down from the decks above, and then the timbers of the boat itself begin to split and splinter. The ship is being ripped asunder. You're being pulled down. Cold, icy water surrounds you, and then you feel the grip of cold, scaly hands as you're dragged into a watery net, and all goes dark around you. Later, you open your eyes, slowly, immediately aware of aches, bumps, and bruises. Around you, a group of familiar, common folk lie in a tumbled heap, caked with mud, disoriented, gaining their senses. A slick, mud-walled shaft ascends overhead, terminating in a pinhole of starry sky far above you and your disheveled company. It is cold, wet, dark. It smells of rot here. 3 poor souls must have landed head first in this pit, or perhaps failed an attempt to climb out. Their necks are broken at grisly angles. Ahead, an irregular opening leads to a burrow-like passage to the east. The Stingbats must have set out for a night of mayhem, and they will return at dawn to devour whatever's left in these pits and caves. Can you escape the swarm before it chews the flesh from your very bones, or will you just simply fall into darkness? There are only a few hours to escape, one chance to survive, one frenzied fight from the sound of death on wings, the cry of the Stingbat.
Oh, yes! That's how the session started, Jody. I played with 2 other players through this gauntlet. Let's gather around the fire and talk about the cry of the Stingbat. I want you to tell me, first off, your just top-line takeaways from the gauntlet. Going into this, what did you think might happen, or what the experience was going to be like? And then, was it different? Was it similar?
Yeah. Wow. Yes and no. It was not my first time running a gauntlet. So the gauntlet part of it went about as expected. The meat grinder, as it were, the chewing through level 0 would-be adventurers, dying grisly deaths in a variety of ways of both their own doing and just harsh realities. That largely played out as I expected. This was my first time running a module or scenario written by Hanker Infernail from Runehammer Games. And there were some quirks of the way he formats and runs an adventure or writes an adventure that I found very interesting, that threw me for a loop at times, to be totally honest, and had me really burning the old GM brain candle at both ends. That torch definitely was flickering and guttering. So yeah, it was mostly how I expected it to go. I mean, at the end of the session, we ended up where we needed to be. We had heroes who had endured something and definitely felt like, I think everybody said like, man, it really feels like those level 1 heroes now feel like heroes. Like they've been through some stuff.
Sitting on the other side of the screen, the aforementioned screen that neither of us use, the feeling for me, so I've never been through, I guess is the best way to say it, through a gauntlet before. So I was, first of all, very excited about this. And I know that the Shadowdark community there are a handful of different kind of well-loved gauntlets out there. I'd never heard of Cry of the Stingbat, but I know that Kelsey's put out one in one of the Cursed Scrolls. So it is a part of the kind of culture of the game. I was super excited to feel like I had some experience with this core element. I didn't know really what to expect. I think I also came out having had an experience that, broadly speaking, like big picture, was pretty much like I expected. But there were a lot of like specific things that happened during the game where I had these moments of, oh, that was quite cool or interesting. And I wonder if there's like where were those? Let's actually go back to something you said. Like, where were those things that threw you for a loop? Like, what were there any that kind of hit you like right away, or did they take longer to kind of reveal themselves in the session?
Yes, both. So one is the modules map is formatted in a really interesting way. If you follow Runehammer games, you'll know that, Hankern is not one to live in a place of complacency. Like, change is good and things be evolving and changing and iterating. So the map's grid, if you will, is a grid based on zones. So there's a graph, and the graph lays out near sections. So close, near, far. So each square of the graph is a near section, which is, as somebody who likes to run kind of more old school and working off even a modern sense, a 5-foot gridded hex map, or not hex map, but just graph papered map. That was a weird thing for my brain to process of like, how big is this room? What it was really nice about was, how far is the torch? Well, how far does that square go? That square is lit up. Okay, this is what you can see around you. So it was really easy to process, like, how much can players see as they enter the chamber, and are you willing to push deeper in the chamber? And they were very large spaces. So that came up a number of times to interesting effect of what was revealed as the light moved around. But it took some adjusting to see that graph paper behind the map, in terms of effectively, if you use measurements, 30-foot chunks as opposed to just general spaces.
That's super interesting.
Really weird.
I didn't find really any. So we should say that we usually tend to be pretty like models and quote unquote tactical combat heavy in our groups. But this time I was actually relatively surprised, because the gauntlet, once we got done with it, wasn't a ton of rooms. And I think you probably could have put together individual kind of scenes for the major rooms, or you could have actually built it out of the scenery that I know that you have and the terrain you have. And I thought that was kind of an interesting decision to actually run this more from a theater of the mind. Yeah. And when we actually put models on the table, they were very much just there to kind of give us a sense of, I think somebody even mentioned like, oh, this is like playing back in like high school, where you like, this M&M is
well, a chili pepper did stand in for a giant toad at one point.
Yeah, there was literally, I mean, we have like a king's ransom between the two of us of fantasy models. You way more than me, to my benefit often, but but we have so many models, and we both have perfectly good models for a giant frog. And
it was actually, the funny part is, that was the only model I was like, oh, I definitely need to make sure to grab this, because I have this this giant toad miniature that is like embarrassingly large at scale. It is the size of like a Volkswagen bus. Like it's huge. And I was like, oh, I want to bring that. That's going to be on. And it's the one thing I forgot. And I was like, the one model that I definitely wanted to have for a set room, because it's one of the only, you may be surprised to know, it's one of the only monsters called out in the entire module. Yeah. Everything else you ran into was not scripted.
I want to get to that, but what I want to say is I didn't find there to be any friction with the way that you were running in terms of the way that you were describing rooms. Like there were a couple of rooms where I think the group collectively was like, it'd be helpful to kind of see this. Mm-hmm. And we can get to the unconscionably horrible confusion room where I just didn't listen or I don't know what happened. Or maybe another player at the table confused me, but I don't think it actually really, like you did a good job of internalizing that and communicating it to us in a way that made sense. But about the encounters,
yeah,
you were very clearly and openly rolling random encounters when this kind of time mechanic would pass by, and so I felt from a player perspective, the time pressure was lovely. It was great. It didn't feel arbitrary. It didn't feel like you weren't, sandbagging it to try and get to encounters or anything. We were moving through the rooms in a reasonable pace. But I think as a GM, rolling random encounters and trying to make them make sense. Like I could see, this is the one part where I couldn't turn my GM brain off. I was like, I could see Jody roll an encounter and I could see you go, what the hell am I going to do with this?
Yep. Yeah, there was one in particular that jumped out that I was like, that's on the list. So it's worth noting that the structure of this adventure is fascinating. The game is set with a 4-hour real-time timer, leaning into the torch timers. And then every 30 minutes, you roll an encounter. Is the way it was written. I was like, I'm going to run it as written. I did make one change for my own sanity. Is it's supposed to use it recommends using the deep caverns table, which has things like 3d6 minotaurs showing up as opposed to the caves encounter table. I opted for the caves encounter table. It with level 0 characters who, if you don't know, it's rare that they're going to have more than one hit point. That's fairly uncommon. You don't need the 10-eyed oracle from the cover of the Shadowdark rulebook to show up to scare the crap out of your players. 3 goblins showing up will get it done just fine.
Or what about 5 bugbears?
5 bugbears felt grossly unfair. Gray oozes come out of the wall. Yeah, you're gonna die. Like if it hits you, you die. So I did opt for that. Plus, I was like, well, there's a chance I'll have those miniatures. That's far more likely that I'll have those than whatever the other stuff was. But yeah, every 30 minutes. So I wish I was a little more sound tech savvy, and it was real hard not to call you on this one and be like, hey, how do I do this? It's worth noting that old Hanker Infernal has created a soundtrack to accompany Cry of the Stingbat, and you can go to Spotify. It's free to access. It's under Cry of the Stingbat. And within that is a Cry of a Stingbat. Unfortunately, I was not able to download that exact sound, but I was able to go out and figure out how to download a scary monster sound. So I set that as a 30-minute timer, and when the timer went off on my phone, it made the scary monster sound.
Oh, that's okay.
And then I rolled on the table, and something was coming. And then I made it visible, which we don't usually do. We've talked before about, that we usually use like sand timers and things like that. We don't usually like having our phones out, but I wanted you guys to see the 30-minute timer from time to time, that it was counting down along with some ambient music and other things going on. So yeah, that rolling random encounters was a lot of fun. And then it also set a timer die of like, well, every 30 minutes that gives you, you hit 4 hours, the time is up. It made that really clear. The opening kind of dramatic reading I did, that was how I literally opened the session. So it did include in there, hey, you have a finite number of hours. And I literally just told you guys, you have 4 hours till dawn, and then the Stingbats are coming back. So that was, again, that foreshadowing of danger. And yeah, and then the random encounters, at one point there was a wraith showed up. There were already bugbears in play. There was the aforementioned giant toad. And when the Wraith showed up, I was like, what the heck do I do with this Wraith in the middle of this room where there's already and so I just had to roll with it. And it was fun. It was fun. It's not usually, that is way outside of my comfort zone. Usually I run a much more populated map.
Yeah. So, I mean, and what was fun is that is the way that I run games. It's a much more generative, procedural roll on tables during the session and, kind of try and fit whatever comes up on the tables into the narrative that's currently at the table. That's my preferred way. And so there was a small bit of like pleasure I got watching you engage with my preferred style of running games. Mm-hmm. The thing that I want to highlight that I thought was really important, it would have been, without the transparency of the time pressure, it would have been a much different adventure. Like if you had, we would have figured it out eventually, but if you wouldn't have told us that you have 4 hours to get out of here, I mean, 4 hours is a long time. Our sessions usually last longer than that. They're at least 4 hours, usually closer to 6, especially for the kind of game that you were running. So I think not knowing that it was 4 hours would have actually been really frustrating if you hadn't told us that up front. And so that was really helpful to know that when we were faffing around, just kind of, role playing in character, that we were essentially wasting time. And so we had to balance the like meta understanding of the time pressure with the desire of the 3 players to like do a little bit of role playing every time a new character would show up, to kind of find a funny voice and also to kind of find the character. Cause we got to the point where we were wondering if the character we were playing was going to be the one.
Yeah.
Is this guy finally going to be the one? Nope. It turns out, was not the one.
Man, that halfling stuck around a lot longer than any of us expected him to.
Yeah. I mean, it's
first line, you're going to die.
Yeah. The player, also hated the character. So we were all happy when that halfling died. I want to ask you about the treasure because, and again, I'm going to start with the player side of things. And, I'll just say that I love as a player rolling for treasure, but it can be very disruptive as a GM, as any random table can. And I don't mean that in the sense that like it's bad or degenerate in any sort of way. Like I don't think it actually can. It can just be very disruptive. Like if players get an item that's extraordinarily helpful, that can be frustrating. And I found an item that was extraordinarily. I found an invisibility potion.
Yeah.
I want to say 2 things about that. First, thank you for being very, like the description that you gave me was evocative and gave me just enough information to think that I knew what the thing was, but also not enough so that when I said I'm going to drink it, I said, I'm going to drink this potion. There was I was like, this might not be an invisibility potion. This might be something else. And in that moment, if you would have told me to like make a con check or something, and then said, so sorry, you're dead, I would have said, totally reasonable. Do I also go invisible? But you described it as there's nothing in the vial, but when you shake it, you can hear liquid. Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff that I love as a player, is just enough information to make a good decision, but also a little not enough to know for sure. So that was great. But I want to hear your thoughts on not just that piece of treasure, but the treasure in general and rolling on treasure tables in the context of like a 0 level adventure.
So yeah, I think that is important, frankly, on a gauntlet. I don't know that I would be inclined towards having fully bespoke and scripted treasure or money or whatever, simply because for Shadowdark, what it provides you is an opportunity for those characters at level 1 to begin with some really unique gear and opportunities. You guys found a suit of chainmail that was like, what a score. I mean, that's genuinely
we haven't rolled the suit of chainmail in our actual like year-long monthly game.
Right. I mean, it's what a find. You guys were rolling lights out.
Yeah.
But my want was like, you guys would just have enough coin that when you got to town, you'd be able to actually transfer the treasure you found to goods. It was kind of funny when you guys found the 3 Warhammers for me, because I was like, oh man, they're going to feel really good about having found these 3 Warhammers. That's awesome. That is a terrible, terrible thing to give level 0 characters, because it makes you think you got a chance. You don't. You still have 1 hit point and you do not get a death timer and nobody can heal. So
we held on to him for a reasonably long time.
You guys got out with 2 out of the 3 of them, and you did make use of them. There was a brief moment where it felt like they were going to be really helpful, and then you remembered you each only have 1 hit point, and you versed at that point only 4 bugbears. So anyway, back to the point of the rolling the treasure. I think it was really important, and if I were to grab one of the DCC modules, which funny enough, I right up until like a day or it's 2 or 3 days before we ran the session, I thought I was going to run Hole in the Sky, which is a pretty well-known DCC level 0 style adventure. And then for a wide variety of reasons, I backed away from that particular adventure. But I still now, if I was to go back and for a different group run one of the DCC gauntlets, I would still go with random treasure and equipment, simply because I think that element of the unknown is so valuable to what you get out at the end, that the items and the money that those characters divide up amongst them to become level 1 characters now has providence, if you will. It has a backstory that's really, to me, is what's the want of a gauntlet, is that these characters that come out of it feel like they're not just people out of nowhere. They have why are they together? Well, they have an actual honest to goodness reason they're together. They survived something together. The quickest way to bond, go through hardships together. So I think that treasure was great. And it also, much like the Warhammers, it provided some really cool opportunities. It was neat to say yes to when you did want to drink the invisibility potion and you wanted to like run around and make use of it in the dungeon. I was like, yeah, absolutely. I want to see that happen. And that was a twist and turn that's 100% not scripted in that adventure. And it allowed for some interesting things. It also allowed for the issue of like, and I'm going to nope out of this fight because I can. And like, I'm getting this guy out at least, so I think it's more of that like generative space that is a lot of fun. And it is neat to see those twists and turns and things evolve. And it's something actually I would say, as much as I don't love running bespoke, or I don't love running random roll monsters, I'm increasingly enjoying running random rolled treasure. Like I do find that fun for all of those reasons. And now you get the added benefit of like, this is the Warhammer I found before I was a character. This is there's that cool little, providence, I think is the term I'm using. And it works. It makes sense. It's fun.
If I played in another one of these, there's not a whole lot that I would want to go differently. Like I thought we established the character backgrounds pretty well, but one thing that I found friction in, because ultimately I had a great time, but the only place I felt like there was a little bit of friction was it was sometimes hard to. I'll say it this way. It's hard to take a gauntlet seriously, and that is always at odds with the fact that that there is serious story here. Like, for instance, you dropped a couple of narrative beats and kind of like story nuggets along the way that I was like, oh, I should be taking notes, but it feels like such a frivolous process because the characters are so expendable. I always take notes, always. And I took 0 notes during the gauntlet. I literally didn't even think about getting out a notepad. And that, I wanted to kind of like talk this through with you. And because I think that there's something here for GMs and for players, which is that gauntlets are by their very nature frivolous and somewhat the characters are disposable, but the gauntlet is also somewhat disposable. It is not going to be the campaign. It's supposed to lend a little bit of narrative flavor to the beginning of the campaign. But if you wanted to run a quote unquote like serious game, I worry that like a gauntlet starts it out on there's maybe not enough seriousness imbued in the process of like so many characters dying in such rapid succession. I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. And as somebody who likes to stay, the way I've kind of lately been phrasing it is, when I'm playing, I want to stay in the game. Like and sometimes like the silly of a game pulls away from staying in the game.
Sure.
And it is deeply enjoyable when you have those tangential conversations that everybody's laughing and you're like, are you sure you want that in your Google search to find out what that is? And, it's a good time. And it's, those are memories that are going to last forever for our most recent one. But it's hard to stay in the game. I think I would draw this kind of analog. A lot of times, I think it's really useful. I think it's incredibly useful to look at a role-playing session and look at your own game. If you're a GM and you're kind of like self-auditing and self-reflecting, what are your movie touchstones? What are your movie genre, your fiction genre touchstones that you go back to? So often, for the old school environment, you've got Conan and Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, and you've got those kind of classic stories, the Black Company, and they're wonderful. Lord of the Rings, obviously. For me, a Gauntlet lives in a place of it's a dark comedy, like the darkest of dark comedies. And it has to be, because if you played it straight, it's horrific.
It would be too much.
I mean, at one point, and I don't know if it was at the intro or somewhere early on, one of the players literally, like, I was describing something gruesome and there I got geez, man. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm right about where I want to be usually. And I mean, it didn't hurt to set that tone. I mean, I made a choice to set that tone immediately. With what to expect. So I had you guys generate 4 characters, following the Shadowdark rules pretty much straight up. I didn't use the optional reroll if you don't have a 14. I didn't elect for that. We did 3d6 down the line, no finagling or adjustment, build 4. And then in the intro narrative, if you caught it, I mentioned there were some bodies in a heap with broken necks. And I said, okay, cross somebody off. That's the bodies. And you guys are like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's not your active character right now. Somebody else, though. They're in the pile. Next. And I did that. That was intentional to be like, nope, we're going to let people go. We're not all going to make it, start crossing them off. But it does. I think it creates a level of dark comedy. And, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next couple sessions that we have ahead using those characters and get to see them live and breathe and be the survivors. You took a very earnest approach, which I think kept that in check, but it also led to some fun moments of like, I don't remember who the character's name was. Like the player just played them as like very bro-y, oversure. And just, we were all of us, including the person playing the character, like, this person needs to go. Please go jab the goop. And when they got devoured by slime, everybody was like, next.
Yeah, I think there's some benefit, because I think what I want to do is like talk a little bit more about how we did things and maybe some takeaways from that. So the first is we rolled up 4 characters, right? And the way that we kind of worked things out, if people had or a need for more characters, which we did, was that you always had a character on deck. Mm-hmm. Because you had said from the beginning that anyone who lives will be able to be your character.
Yeah, so you didn't have to play the person you were playing when the session ended. So if you saved 2 of your 4, you'd have 2 characters to pick from.
And so the way we worked that was that there were active characters, and those active characters were the only ones who were taking damage and doing things, and everyone else was kind of just like in the NPC fog, kind of moving along with the party. We tried to kind of role play that there were other people there occasionally, but for the purposes of the mechanics, they weren't. Then if you needed more characters, you just always had a backup so that you couldn't generate like 3 new characters and then suddenly have like, essentially 3 stat lines to choose from,
right?
As a kind of metagamey kind of thing. And I thought that worked really well. I actually was feeling by the end of the game that having only 2 characters in front of me, I don't know if I would like it, but I would love to kind of try and always only have 1 character. So like from the beginning, rolling 4 characters, I wasn't sure who any of them were. Mm-hmm. And there's this kind of cool exercise that a gauntlet allows you to do, which is basically just like try out characters rapid fire. Mm-hmm. Like for a player, it was cool to and I love doing this as a GM. So as a player, of course, I enjoyed it. But I just got to come up with new characters and like try and find the character as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really cool. I don't know. I treated it almost like a training exercise of going like, who is this character? Who is this character? Find a touchstone, find the thing, find the hook, find whatever. And then, find the voice. And some of the characters just had no personality. I mean, they were just nothing.
Yeah.
And then I found this character, and it luckily it's one of the ones who survived.
Hank,
who I called Hank, not knowing that you were running. I didn't know what the adventure was called. I knew nothing about it. I didn't know that Hankrin Fernale or Hank of Runehammer had written it, and my character who lived was called Hank. But he kind of has like a slight Batman vibe, but also is like a former soldier. So I went with this kind of very kind of sort of earnest dude, justice and but pragmatic. And that was super cool to find characters, or to just not find the character and realize that this guy needs to go, because I have no idea who this person is. They have not, as you like to say, run under the page at all. And I don't know, that was fun for me. It was a way to keep it a little bit more grounded. And I would like to see maybe from the beginning having like fewer options, because then there was like a genuine sense of being able to kind of maybe think ahead, and it was a little overwhelming with 4 characters. But I don't know, maybe that's just like a very idiosyncratic thing for me.
Well, and I hear you, and I want to emphasize, I knew I was going to cut you down to 3 in the first room, like in the first.
I wasted 3 minutes of my life making that
but you got, because it was you and you only rolled 4s for your D4 gear, you found 4 extra pieces of gear off that body. So there you go. You had so much rope that you guys put to excellent use. We
had
did
like
all of the rope
and
tricks.
some odd feet of rope at the beginning of this.
It was fabulous. Actually, that was one of the points I really wanted to ask you about. Is you have shared with me many times about feeling, I don't know if you use the word duped, by what you see in modern role playing of the build your dream character. The like you get to take the time to think up the thing, and if you're like going to a modern session 0, part of it is like, I'm thinking of playing this kind of character and I want it to fit into the campaign, and the GM's going to work in that your backstory and your 12 brothers and sisters and your Aunt Rosie who raised you all, and you've have some strong opinions and feelings about that. And this is, I don't know that you can swing the pendulum any further away from the modern, let me build my backstory character that has lived a lifetime and then shows up at level 1 confusingly. In contrast to, here's 4 people, they're probably not going to live. We have yet to roll up the character who may or may not show up, or not. I mean, but somebody on this page of 4 hopefully makes it out. It's a very different experience for character creation.
So to provide a little bit more context, my start in role playing was like many people, due to kind of like the 5e critical role kind of sphere, that kind of, and what I brought to the table was some assumptions that we're just simply not in line with the assumptions that you have about how a role-playing game works. And I think that kind of friction happens at a lot of tables. And luckily we have had lots of conversations about what kind of game you run, what kind of game I like to play in. And I feel like there's a lot of we're on the same page stuff going on now, which is good. However, I find that modern role-playing games presenting to players this idea that like, you're going to build a character, and that character is kind of supposed to live. I am currently running a 5e game that's very much like that, and the 2 players I run for are really enjoying it. I'm enjoying it because we all came to the table with the assumption that that's the story we were going to tell. However, for me, as a new player, that was actually not a good entry point, because I didn't have the understanding of what a good character for a role-playing game would be. And so I want to actually push back on some of the kind of conventional wisdom that I've seen kind of cruising around the Shadowdark Discord, and which is that you shouldn't ever run a gauntlet for new Shadowdark players. And I think 2 things. First of all, if they're brand new to role-playing games, I kind of agree with that. I think it would be a little bit, not dishonest, but it would not be this is not a traditional, in any sort of way,
Right.
entry point, right? But if you're bringing people from 5e into Shadowdark, there is a way to do it through a gauntlet that I think would be fun, would require a lot of expectation setting, but at the end would have the result of, hey, see, you just lived this character's backstory. So the thing that you like about your 5th edition character, where you wrote, your, I'm not trying to be pejorative here or anything, but like you write your 12-page backstory, and that's kind of again, I enjoy that kind of game when that's the agreed upon game that is being run and played in. But what I enjoy more currently, and what I think you could do for 5e players, is this style of game where it's more, the narrative comes out of play. And so I don't know, that's a lot of words, but I think I'll throw it back at you of, how did that hit your ear? Or does that sound like, something you can agree with, or are you kind of in that same camp of don't run a gauntlet for players who are new, even if they've had experience?
Yeah, my first item I want to stress is, if somebody has never role played before, a gauntlet would be a very, very strange spot to start your very first ever role-playing experience, unless the person knew exactly what they were getting into and for sure was going to have the opportunity on the other side to enjoy the fruits of their character having survived a gauntlet and finding their character that way. The great thing is you get to show up and go, here are 3 6-sided dice, begin rolling them and adding them together 6 times. And that's all you have to do. It's all randomly generated. I even went so far as I added in, I lied earlier. I'm a big liar. I had you guys even roll for your ancestry. I didn't allow you to pick ancestries. That was a meism, as I added in like...
Oh, you usually don't get to...
You get to pick usually, yeah, and I had you guys roll.
You big bully.
I am a big fun... I am the fun police.
You just love humans.
Well, they are the most common people in my setting. So again, I was tailor-making to my setting. I think anything other than that it is this person has never played a role-playing game before and they're having their first experience, which I think Shadowdark is exceptional at, being my first role-playing game, or I'm deeply veteran and I just want to get back to the fun stuff. And I mean, mechanics are great and I love crunchy, but I want to get back to a little faster and looser. Either of those camps, Shadowdark serves exceptionally well. I don't think I'd do a gauntlet for a brand noob. But it does beg the question, well, then who or why gauntlet? Like, who or why begin a game this way? So anybody else, I think, is a great option. You've played a few sessions. You're like, okay, we're going to start a campaign. It's a one-off convention-style game. Gauntlet forever. Super fun. Because, again, see dark comedy. You're going to have laughs. People are going to die in horrible, horrible ways. Something that sprung on me in the moment, speaking of, I thought was really fun and would definitely do again, one of the characters, the aforementioned halfling, got hit with a natural 20 by a creature's attack. And I was like, hey, how do you want your character to die? Like, as a natural 20, which was super fun to be like,
a truly brilliant move.
And it ended up being this like great little story of like, everybody get out, I'll hold the door. Oh God. And he got just melted and it was great. So the why, though, I think is why gauntlet, and why did I settle on a gauntlet this go around? One, because I knew, Matt, your feelings about character creation. I went, hey, this is like all of the things we've been talking about. The gauntlet seems to scratch those itches. 2, I was able to find the cry of the Stingbat, which really neatly landed and let me deliver some little sprinkling, some little salt bay over those dying characters to give them an on-ramp into the next few sessions that they're going to play in my setting and explore and enjoy. So it was a really nice way to a very low stakes, like, show the world. It's a great tone setter. If you are going to run a dark fantasy, more what people associate with old school of character death is on the table, and you want to set that tone that like, hey, characters might die here. They don't have to. But setting that danger level, boy, howdy, does it make it clear when your hit points run out, that's bad. So I think there's a lot of whys. If you are wanting to tell a bespoke story though, and you enjoy the game where the characters that your players are creating are at the center of that story, Gauntlets is an unnecessary step, frankly. It's getting in the way of doing that. But if you want something, and a big part of how Shadowdark is presented and laid out is generative, in that you're just rolling on tables and you're having an experience to reveal the story, that things are unfolding in front of you. And I, again, admittedly, am not a GM who defaults that way. Anything other than your characters are the center of the story, and I'm going to build that game around my characters and my players. Anything else, the Gauntlet's great for. That style of play, it's just getting in the way, and I think you could let it lie. But it does a lot of things really well to kind of introduce somebody to what Shadowdark is, and if you're trying to stay true to what's in the book as much as possible without your own biases and styles of play, I think it's, again, yet a further distillation of those things.
All right, Jody, that is a nice place to end this conversation as we gathered around the fire. We're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsor, then we're going to bring the topic into the light and talk about some of our core takeaways. Dungeon Master Diaries is brought to you by Tuber Eats, the halfling meal delivery service. It's been a long day. You're tired. You've been crawling around in the dark, cheating death, discovering massive treasure hoards. Do you really have time to cook? Of course not. And you don't have to, because with Tuber Eats, you can have delicious breakfast, second breakfast, 11sies, luncheon, afternoon tea, dinner, supper, you name it. Tuber Eats is the best meal delivery service out there because they don't just deliver the food, they make it fresh to order. Savory meat pies, honey cakes, roasted rooster, dumpling soup, and their specialty, Relina's ale stew with ruby red tomatoes. Get all of that and more delivered right now with no minimum order, folks. Did you just smoke a little bit too much pipe leaf today? Got a hankering for something tasty? Well, just use the code DMD when you order to get 10% off your first one. Tuber Eats. Tasty eats. Hairy feats. All right, Jody, let's dive into our core takeaways from our discussion as we bring this topic back into the light. I'll let you start. What's your first one?
Okay, I'm going to add a bonus one in. Try a gauntlet. They're fun. If you haven't before, try it. It's fun. Do it. Okay. But my actual takeaway is when you go to do a gauntlet, telegraph your danger. If you're working on that skill, especially if you are an old school style player and death saves are a thing you enjoy, telegraph that danger. It's even more fun to telegraph danger here because they can't survive. There's no out. If they pick
what are they going to do?
They're like, we're going to hit it. Okay. Anyway,
it's you.
What you got?
I've got, this is very true to form, but set expectations. I think the genuinely lovely thing about gauntlets is that they offer a very specific style of play. And if you don't set expectations about what players should expect when they arrive at the table and what to expect during the course of play, this could be a not so great situation. So setting expectations is always important, but it's kind of even more important when you're talking about a gauntlet because it deviates so dramatically from the normal just RPG. I build a character and play a character, which is kind of present in the vast majority of RPGs. So setting expectations is my first one. What do you got, Jody, for your next one?
I think there's an opportunity that I feel like is overlooked with session zeros / level zeros. That was a mix up, but also true. Like this is a different kind of session zero, really. But
that's interesting. Yeah.
With that said, it's also an opportunity to show your campaign world, your setting, your particular milieu, your way of delivering a game. The gauntlet can be adapted to that. If you run a whimsical one, you could have a whimsical gauntlet where fairies show up and poof magic, toadstool circles and people just disappear, or they drink things and they get very small and then a bird plucks them up and flies away with them. Like it doesn't have to be my gritty fantasy that I like. And I would recommend go check out some of the DCC ones because there's a huge variety for Dungeon Crawl Classics of tones and styles, but there is still lots of opportunity for you to play with your campaign setting as you are chewing through these farmers and peasants.
All right. So my final one is roll random treasure as much as you feel comfortable, but giving level 0 characters fun, weird, random treasure that they can use in imaginative ways. They're level 0. They have probably 1 hit point. They're gonna die quickly. But if they make it out with that treasure, like you said, Jody, just has so much more weight behind it. And it's just fun. It's just fun. So roll random treasure in these gauntlets. Give your characters weird stuff to use, and then sadly leave behind.
Yeah. All right, friends, as the torchlight grows dim, we hope you were able to find something useful in our discussion that you can take into your future games. If you have any questions or a unique experience from your table that you'd like us to discuss in a future episode, head over to the Dungeon Master Diaries thread on Shadowdark's Discord channel. Look for the links to any materials we referenced in this episode's thread and in the show notes. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can find Jody on the Shadowdark Facebook page under the handle Pezman, and you can message Matt via Discord using the handle SCMatt. Until next time, later, you peasants.
Dungeon Master Diaries is a production of the Stingbat Radio Network, and it is produced by Jody Kropholler and edited by Matt Bruner. Our intro and outro music is composed by Christian Schuster. Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production. It is not affiliated with the Arcane Library, LLC. Shadowdark RPG is a product of the Arcane Library. Copyright 2023!